we thought we would talk about just how expensive raising children is in America.
Now, sit down and buckle up.
Oh my gosh.
More than $300,000 to raise a child through age 17.
The decision to have children is obviously not exclusively a financial one. There is a very important financial aspect to this decision that we feel like we should talk about.
I have said it to clients before. There are ways and options to fund education. There is no loan, grant, scholarship for your retirement. So you don't want to neglect your own long-term planning, and you've got to figure out the best way to balance those goals as you're raising a family.
Hello, hello, welcome back.
Hello, good to see you as always.
Great to see you as always, too, and great to be heard and be seen by all of you. Welcome back to another episode of Living Richly with Curo, episode number 69. Thank you so much for tuning in for the first time if you are new to us, and thank you so much to our OG viewers and listeners for coming back. My name is Anne McCabe. I am the CEO and a partner here at Curo Private Wealth, and I'm joined, as always, by my lovely partner, Atrisa.
Hello, viewers and listeners. I'm Atrisa Roberts, COO and partner here at Curo. Thanks for checking us out.
Absolutely. So, in honor today of back to school, we thought we would talk about just how expensive raising children is in America. And if you are new to our show, we are all about inspiring, educating, and empowering you on your financial journeys. And although the decision to have children is obviously not exclusively a financial one, there is a very important financial aspect to this decision that we feel like we should talk about because I think a lot of people don't talk about it and they just think about the emotional, I want to have children piece of it, which is lovely and
Right.
beautiful and wonderful. But let's be real, there's a financial impact as well.
Yes, for sure. They're not cheap. And the cost of having one gets more and more expensive every year.
Yeah, literally feels like by the day sometimes. So we recently came across an article in the Wall Street Journal that was titled What It's Really Like to Support a Big Family on a Modest Income. So today we're going to highlight some of the key takeaways from that particular article, but also blend them with some insights that we have on financial planning strategies that may just help, tip the scales in your favor when we're talking about this topic. So, we're going to kick it off with the sort of current situation in the US. The interesting news is that more Americans than ever are putting off the decision to have children or deciding not to have them all. The US fertility rate is at an all-time low and far below the rate needed to keep the population stable. And the average age of women giving birth in the US has risen to nearly 30 years old, up from 27 in 2000, according to some government data that we put our hands on. So the standard is increasingly out of reach, and costs for basics like housing, childcare, which we'll talk about more in a bit, and education have just absolutely skyrocketed. And more families are just finding that they cannot make life work with just one parent working. And it's especially the case given how standards of parenting have risen, making a lot of middle class parents feel obligated to adopt a more enrichment heavy, activity heavy, hobby heavy, and costly form of child rearing.
Yeah, it's actually pretty funny. There's a trend on social media now where Zennials and Gen X are talking about their stories as latchkey kids. And you
Yeah.
realize how many parents now don't allow or don't feel comfortable with just having their children go home and be by themselves after school, like I did. I mean, I think by 10 or 11, I was, walking home from the school bus and getting home by myself before my parents got home from work. So Interesting.
Yeah, it is very interesting how the parenting styles and the pendulum has swung in probably one extreme to the other, which oftentimes
Yeah.
happens.
Yeah. There's typically always I call it an overcorrection, but
Yeah,
it
for
swings back
sure.
and forth.
Yeah, I think overcorrection is fair.
Yeah. So many people, of course, are deciding to have fewer children than they would like to because unfortunately, they're not sure they're going to be able to pay for the cost of having big families. An analysis done in 2022 by the Brookings Institution found that it now costs, now sit down and buckle up,
Oh my
more
gosh.
than $300,000 to raise a child through age 17. This estimate does not count the cost of college. Can you imagine?
Does not. And college is not cheap.
No, not even. Americans would have to spend $20,745 to buy a basket of goods and services commonly used in a baby's first year versus $15,775 for a similar basket in 2022, according to Baby Center, a parenting website. So just think about just even feeding children for
Yeah.
17 years, not counting what it costs to send them to school if that's their plan. I mean, $300,000 is an immense amount of money. And then you think about families like yours, where there are multiple children in
Uh-huh.
the household. I'll start buying some lottery tickets for you,
Oh my God, please. We need
Ann.
all the help we can get for sure. So let's talk about and break down where every dollar goes. So here are the big ticket items that really put a strain on family budgets. And coming in first place is housing. So nearly 32% of child-related spending goes to housing. Think of that, like a third of people's income
Hmm.
goes to housing. The next big ticket item, and this is not probably a surprise to you all, is childcare and education. This is often in the high teens of folks' income as a percentage is going to pay for childcare and education. And this is especially for younger children, tends to be a higher percentage and just extremely costly. We actually have some clients who just had their third child, and the wife is a teacher, and they ran the numbers, and it would actually be cheaper for the family budget for her to decide to stay
Wow.
home at least for a year or two and be with the three children versus adding another one to the daycare roster. I mean, just incredible when you think about that. And you think about too the long-term career impacts to
Hmm.
women because it typically is a woman who makes this choice. Not always. There are certainly stay-at-home dads, but more often than not, it's the woman who makes this decision, and there are really rippling effects to that choice. Now, she's a teacher, and so when she decides to go back to work, I'm sure there will be plentiful opportunities for her. But, in corporate America, that may not be the case.
Yeah. And I mean, to that point, we have a client who is basically like a researcher, scientist, is what her early career was, made the choice to stay home and raise her sons. And now her sons are finishing college and she wants to be back in the workforce and is struggling to find
Yeah,
opportunity in her preferred field because of that missing experience or gap
right.
in experience.
Right, exactly. Yeah, so that's the other thing is I think a lot of people say, "Oh, well, I'll just take a few
Hmm.
years off, raise my children, and then I'll make the choice to get back into the labor force." But that's assuming that there will be a demand for your experience and what, you can bring to the table when you're ready to go back to work. So, lots of things to consider. Okay, moving on. Next, we have, which I believe is the third item, food, around 18%. And with three teenage boys, I'm pretty sure my number is like 98% of my income goes to food. It's real. I mean, how much money we spend on food is crazy. So this varies widely, but on average, about 18% of folks' income is going to pay for food for children. And then the last category is transportation, healthcare, and miscellaneous, sort of round out the 100%. Healthcare is an interesting thing to think of too, because I think when people decide to have children, some things can happen, right? From a
Hmm.
medical standpoint, babies can get sick or moms can have complications during pregnancy. So The other thing that is common is just additional healthcare expenses and medical
Right,
expenses that come up as a result of the pregnancy and the childbirth, and then just raising children, which,
right.
they get sick.
They are
Another
little
thing I
petri
can,
dishes running around swapping germs and
yes, exactly.
for sure. So there are a few things that families are doing differently now to try to help offset some of these costs. Of course, the obvious one are choosing to have less children than they want. And it's unfortunate. Now, as a woman who's made a choice to not have children, a part of it was made around money, but not, it was more lifestyle choice for me. But I also empathize with families who would love to have a big family and simply can't afford to do so. I think that's unfortunate. They're also making lifestyle adjustments like buying secondhand or reducing unnecessary purchases, minimizing impulse spending. And that's probably why I have chosen not to be a parent.
She's
Now
just
that
like
I think about
minimizing
it.
impulse spending. No, that does
No,
not
thank
sound
you.
fun.
So, so you think about it, it's very expensive. And if you do want to have children, and especially multiple children, then sacrifices at times, unfortunately, have to be made.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so let's talk about some practical tips and tricks that we have and an approach that we would recommend if you do find yourself in a situation where you are raising a family and you can relate to the topic that we're talking about today about how little kiddos are expensive. So, number one, prioritize and categorize your spending. Now, this is probably the least sexy advice that we give at Curo all the time, but we need you to track your spending so we know where every dollar is going. And I know this is not the fun, sexy, like, let's talk about what stock to buy sorts of things. But it's incredibly important and very powerful. So make sure you know where every dollar goes because having that information is empowering so that you can then make choices and decide, do you need to tweak or pivot from a spending standpoint? Number two, as Teresa was just mentioning, leverage creative cost saving strategies. So things like buying secondhand, thrifting, even swapping childcare services. So one of the things that we read about as we were researching for this episode is this idea that two families who are friends who have kids of similar ages, one family will put their children down for bed, the other family will come over and just be at home. They're not even really babysitting because the kids are asleep, but just in case obviously the kids wake up, they're there and then the, original couple can go out for a date night and then they'll just flip-flop, right? Next time the second couple will put the kids down for bed and one of the spouses will come over to watch the children and they, can go out for a date night. I thought that was really
Yeah.
creative. And because one of the other huge expenses, especially for couples, if they want to just go out and go to a movie or have a date night, which is really important for your relationship when you're raising children, is it's so expensive to get a babysitter. Like you're $100 out the door just to have a babysitter, forget dinner and a movie or whatever else you're doing for date night. So
Yeah.
I thought that was a really creative idea. And then there are also so many sites at this point, like Buy Nothing, I think is one of them that exists where people have things that they want to get rid of and they don't necessarily want to sell them or necessarily donate. They would rather for somebody in the local community to benefit. So there are,
Hmm.
luckily, I think a lot of ways to obtain things without having to spend a bunch of money and just be creative, think outside the box for these sorts of decisions.
Yeah. Regarding babysitters, and of course, I wouldn't know. Are there still like teen neighborhood sitters? Like I used to babysit
Yeah,
for my neighbor across the street. You can still find that?
for sure, but like
Oh,
they're
okay.
charging they're charging like 20 to $25 an hour. I
Yeah.
mean,
Inflation is
yeah, inflation is real. So yes, they exist, but are they like, oh, I could just pay my local teen neighbor babysitter like $10 an hour? Not happening. Yeah.
got it. The rates have gone up.
They have
Interesting.
Sephora, okay? Like they got to be able to buy the
Right.
expensive skincare products that they all buy. Like they can't be charging $12 an hour.
That is
So
so funny.
they do exist though.
Yeah. Okay. So another approach we recommend, and you're gonna probably feel annoyed to hear us say it again, but here it is, cash reserves, emergency fund. Unexpected expenses happen when you have children. They are inevitable. Kids fall, they hit a baseball through a neighbor's window, whatever the thing is, right? There's always some unexpected expense that will pop up. So having reserves of cash is always recommended, especially for large families. Explore tax advantage tools like HSAs, which we love,
Hmm.
529 plans to help plan for education. And now, of course, there are tweaks to those rules that allow you to use it for primary education as well. FSAs or flexible spending accounts and child tax credits, things, tax advantages you can take when you're having children. And then make sure you don't forget to fund your long term goals for retirement. I have said it to clients before. There are ways and options to fund education. There is no loan, grant, scholarship for your retirement. So you don't want to neglect your own long-term planning, and you've got to figure out the best way to balance those goals as you're raising a family.
Yeah, absolutely. Another thing, back to the people who decide to stay at home with
Mm-hmm.
children to remember too, is if you leave the workforce, you are no longer funding a retirement
Mm-hmm.
plan. Maybe you're funding an IRA, but m most times you're not. And so that also is going to have a negative impact on your long-term retirement planning. So really, really important to consider. One of the things too that we'll often recommend for new parents is to live like you already have the baby and like you already have the expenses. So if you're about to have your first child, for example, and you can do some research to see, how much is childcare in your area, do some research on how much do people spend on average on diapers on a monthly basis. It's like probably $1,000. I'm just kidding. It's not that much, but it's a lot. Or formula, like some of these pretty expensive items. And even before the baby comes, start living like you have those expenses in place and start getting used to that cash flow. And then just stick that extra money that you're not spending anymore in a savings account to build up those cash reserves that Teresa was just talking about. But really starting to get used to your new reality and your new expense situation, I think is really important and helpful before you're even there. So you get a sense for what it feels like.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I think about, I have to share, my best friend and I've told you about her before,
Yeah.
has 5 children, and they range in age from 17 to 7 months old.
Hmm.
And sometimes I am just astonished, right? My flabbers are gasted with the number of people, right? And the cost of that. And 4 of the 5 are boys. And they're all in hobbies, marching band and tennis and this after school program. And this one's going to DC for the summer. And I just sometimes I can't even imagine how they are handling the cost of having that many kids at home, especially when you think about a $300,000 price tag on each of
Yeah.
them. That's $1.5 million of child raising, which
Right.
is insanity to me to even consider.
Yeah, and that's an average, right? So
Right.
like likely if her kids are in more activities, which it sounds like they are, up that price tag, right? That
Yeah.
doesn't include the all the various extracurricular activities that it sounds like her kids are involved in, which are important. It's part of, being a kid and growing up and having exposure to a lot of different things. But yeah, it's not cheap.
Yeah.
As we were just talking about prior to hitting record, me and my hockey boys, I mean, good Lord, like the most expensive sport. And then I have a goalie. So it's like the most expensive sport. And then you add the goalie
Right.
equipment and pads on top. And it's just like there's their college fund right there. So
Yeah, I mean, even sports, right? The cost of those kinds of activities got more expensive. They're more exclusive and they're travel teams. And it's not just like your local,
yeah,
high school team or middle school team that you're playing basically for free for. So it's challenging. I definitely sympathize with the parents out there who are not just struggling with the juggle of raising them, but then also
right.
the cost, right? The
Yeah,
price tag of raising them. It's a lot.
yeah. Struggling with the juggle and the dollars.
And the dollars.
Yeah. And back to kind of the original point that we kicked off this conversation with, I do think that a lot of people make the decision to have kids and don't necessarily think about the financial aspect. And we're not saying that we think you shouldn't have kids. We're saying that we do think that the financial aspect should be considered and sort of understood, going in eyes wide open before you
Yeah.
make that decision.
Yeah, I mean, and just as an advisor, I think like most decisions that you make that have a financial impact, they have to be done deliberately, right? It's got to be a deliberate, thought out decision with a plan attached
Hmm.
to it. Like anything else we would advise, you want to buy a house. Well, what's our plan, right? You want to have children. I think you have to consider what the financial plan for that looks like.
Yeah, absolutely. So any parting words of wisdom or additional?
Don't have kids. No.
I was wondering if that was coming.
Just JK, guys.
Joking,
JK,
joking.
JK, JK. But again, I think it's just a double click on that point. Is let's just be very deliberate around the decisions, around the conversations. You can never plan for everything. Nobody plans for their newborn to spend time in a NICU or for children to have learning or, physical challenges. Nobody can really plan for that. But I do think it's something that you have to consider when you make a decision because there are also so many unknown variables
Yeah.
that they are very hard to plan for. And you have to consider what that means for you and your lifestyle and your checkbook, right? And
Yes.
consider how all of those things may factor as you start to make these discussions or make these choices. Have real discussions with your partners and make sure that you understand all that is involved or could possibly be involved in this idea to start a family.
Yeah, absolutely. Amen. All right. What do you have for us for a closing thought?
I don't know. I struggled with my closing thought today. I think the thing that's sort of been the most kind of in the back of my head, just from a personal situation, is just trying to navigate this sort of what I feel like is my physical and emotional and hormonal transition into this stage of my life. I realize how often, and I just had this conversation with someone, how much just the feeling of getting older kind of weighs on you sometimes, and you don't know how much of that is just a mental game and how much of it is actual. No, my hip actually hurts, right? Or my knee is actually bothering me.
Yeah.
Um, so I've been sort of dealing with um different phases and sort of waves of this feeling. And I think this week has been more challenging, just like low energy, feeling a little fatigued, not really being able to put my finger on the why of it
Mm,
though. It's like, oh, I didn't do anything on Sunday. Like, why did I wake up Monday feeling exhausted? Right. So just trying to navigate what that's like. So
mhm,
for me, I think I've been trying to channel it in a way, okay, well, then how can I make all of the other factors better, right? So
mhm,
making a conscious choice to eat better this week, right? Introducing more fruit and vitamins and fiber, adding flaxseed to the smoothie mixes. And
mhm.
so trying to essentially get my arms around the things I can't control because there's so much happening of the things that I can't and I don't
Right.
understand the why of. So that's how I've been trying to balance that this week with just figuring out, okay, well, what can I do to help make my body feel better and to make myself feel better? So if I have any closing thought, it's about that, right? If
Yeah.
you're finding yourself in kind of like this challenging space, whether it's physical or environmental or whatever's happening in your life and in your world, is it to try to focus on the pieces you can move, right? The levers you can pull, because some things will just happen. So that's really where I've been trying to focus my energy. I drank more tea this week than I think I have in the last year.
That's
Just trying to,
great.
yeah, just trying to find like what makes my body feel better, eating more ginger, steeping my tea with some ginger, just trying to get myself kind of back into feeling really good. So
Yeah.
that's just my closing thought. When you're struggling, try to focus on the things you can control.
Yeah, that's awesome. We talk about that all the time, right? With respect to our clients and the markets and policy, right? Just identifying what you can control. And it's those inputs, and you can't
Yeah.
necessarily control the outputs or the results, but based on past experience, if you do X, then typically it will, make you feel better. So
Yes.
that's great. You're
Yeah.
taking action.
Yes, I want to be, healthy and fit for as long as I possibly
Vibrant.
can. And I'm like,
Yeah.
wait, no, we got to get this together. Like, I got to feel
Yeah.
better than this.
Yeah, we're not old enough
No.
yet we are geriatric millennials, but we're not not old enough to be feeling like old.
Right.
Not okay. So,
Yeah. All right. Well, what's on your
Posted.
mind this week?
So on my mind, I spent some time with a cousin of mine who is in town. He came over last night for dinner and actually came to goalie's hockey practice. And one of the things he shared with me, he's like 35, single, and spends time in various different countries. He kind of like goes around and has a very free and independent lifestyle,
Mm,
and which is always super fascinating to hear his stories. Originally from Germany, now spending some time here in the US, some time in Germany, and some time in Brazil. So, one of the things he shared with me, which I thought was a really cool idea, is he has accountability partners for various goals that he has. So, a couple of examples that he gave were around like meditating. So, he wants to make sure he meditates twice a day for 20 minutes, exercising. So, some kind of lifestyle goals, but he has these accountability partners, and they've made a commitment that if they don't do the thing that they say they're going to do, they pay each other $100 like per infraction. And he was like, I will tell you, sometimes I get home and it's like my second meditation that I'm supposed to do, and I am exhausted and I don't feel like doing it. And he's like, but there is no way I'm paying that dude $100 to not meditate for 20 minutes. He's like, it has been so impactful and like actually very successful. And I was like, that is so cool, like
yeah,
figure out what works for you. He was like, I'm not an intrinsically necessarily motivated individual, but I want to do these things. And so he's built a structure of accountability for himself that works very effectively. And I thought that that was just a great idea.
I
So I
think it is
wanted to
a
share.
fantastic idea. I actually think I'm going to steal it because
Good.
I do pretty good with just sort of being self-disciplined. Like when I make up my
Yeah,
mind to do something, I usually can do it with no issue. But the thought of having to give one of my friends $100 because I didn't do it, oh my God, I would do it 3 times first.
exactly. I know. I know. I was like, oh yeah. I know. I was trying to think about, okay, what could I do and who would I want to do that with? But yeah, I thought it was a great idea, and it's working for him, and I think it's just, a simple thing. And he was like, and we know, like we trust each other, and we know
Hmm.
that if we do something or we don't do something, like,
Yeah, we'll be
we're
honest
going to be
about it and
honest with
take
each other.
accountability. Yeah.
Exactly. So, that's my closing thought.
I love that. Well,
Shout
I
out
love,
to
of course,
Goswin.
the thought about accountability in general, but just even the sort of style they've chosen around it is fantastic.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I
So,
got to figure out how I can implement that.
yeah. Me too.
Hmm,
We'll noodle it.
we'll
We'll
noodle it.
noodle it. All right, everyone. That wraps us for another week. Thank you so much for tuning in. We will see you back here next week, as we always do. And until then,
Live richly.
thanks again for tuning in. If you enjoyed today's episode, please be sure to subscribe and share it with someone who might benefit from it. Friendly reminder that this is for informational purposes only. For additional information, please visit us at www.curoprivatewealth.com. Until next time, live richly.